describe this Chabahar port as a strategic port. So how do you see this Chabahar port from Indian perspective? How does it give a strategic significance to India?
Thank you, Dr. Tripathi. It's $1 million question that if it is so strategic, why it has taken 20 years? That the Russians want you in order to counter China. US wants India to counter China. India wants to extract the maximum mileage for its own national interest, for its own development, so that it becomes a developed country by 2047. That's the target, whatever happens. So I think that our policy at the moment is to get the best out of it without getting entangled. We engage, but we do not entangle. So Iran's importance is civilizational for us. It is a strategic country. We need to work with them.
Hello everyone, welcome to the Forum for Global Studies latest podcast. Myself, Dr. Sandeep Tripathi, founder FGS. Today's topic is India, Iran and Chabahar port. For today's topic, we have with us distinguished guest, a leading authority on West Asia, Africa and Russia. We have with us Ambassador Anil Trigunayat sir. Sir, most welcome for FGS podcast.
Thank you, Dr. Tripathi. Thank you so much.
Ambassador Anil Trigunayat sir, he has been India's ambassador to Jordan and Libya and High Commissioner to Malta. In his illustrious career of diplomacy, he has served as a distinguished diplomat abroad. Currently, he is also serving as the President, Misia Chamber of Commerce. So thank you so much, sir.
Thank you.
For FGS latest podcast. And I hope that the kind of experience he has last 35 years in diplomacy. So his insights on Iran and India and especially Chabahar port is going to be very, very fruitful for policymakers, for students, for researchers, and above all, for all the layman who is interested in international relations. So thank you so much, sir.
Thank you, Dr.
Today we will talk on Chabahar port. So, sir, as we know that in 2002, around $245 million between China and Pakistan. There was a deal to build Gwadar port. And subsequently, after the 1 year, India was offered by Chabahar by Iran to make a bulk of investment and to develop the infrastructure of the Chabahar port. So, but from this long journey, there was, progress was very slow and it got momentum, after 2016. So first of all, sir, the first question to you that as you always, describe this Chabahar port as a strategic port. So how do you see this Chabahar port from Indian perspective? How does it give a strategic significance to India?
Thank you, Dr. Tripathi. It's $1 million question that if it is so strategic, why it has taken 20 years to move slowly? And that's a legitimate question. But as you know that strategic projects are conceived and then implemented depending on bilateral relations, international context, and the immediate threats and challenges. So there are several factors that count in that prospect. At the same time, India, Iran and Russia had also started working on something called International North-South Transport Corridor, INSTC, which is also nearly 20 years now. It has also had some hiccups. It has taken on board several Central Asian countries. Now, as you know that before independence, Afghanistan, we had a direct connectivity. With Iran, we have very special civilizational relationship that has been going on there. But unfortunately for Iran, or because of 1979 onwards, because of the relations with the United States, the wars in the region, for many issues, including the nuclear issue, Iran has been under tremendous sanctions from the West. These sanctions were not only impacting Iran, they were also impacting rest of the world, including India. While we were procuring about 12% of our oil from Iran, these sanctions eventually forced us, after several waivers that the Trump administration and the Obama administration gave us, we saw that we had to eventually wean off from this. Chabahar port's strategic critical significance was in order to allow India a possible connectivity corridor, and that is Chabahar to Afghanistan as well as to Central Asia, which are natural extensions of India's periphery. And therefore, in order to, because of the relationship with Pakistan, our issues have remained there, and this has taken very long. In the meantime, China started its corridor, which you mentioned about Gwadar port, and it started investing. Then in 2013, when China started its Belt and Road Initiative. One of the key components of the Belt and Road Initiative is the Gwadar port and China-Pakistan economic corridor. That has a direct relevance for India's strategic outreach. And therefore, once that equation came into being, obviously for the Indians, it became far more important to work more actively on the Chabahar port. And that's when it has. At the same time, we were seeing that Iran and USA, JCPOA was signed in 15, and then things were becoming normal. So in normal trade began, Chabahar port also picked up. Then Trump administration came, which pulled out of the JCPOA, the nuclear agreement, and then again imposed sanctions on Iran. So those sanctions, which are called CAATSA, started impacting India. So these are directly, sanctions have a direct impact on many aspects of our relationship with Iran as far as economic and trade relationship is concerned. But Chabahar is a strategic port, so it was because of in the context of Afghanistan, it was not directly in the purview of the sanctions. It had an exemption sort. But many of the companies, Indian companies, were not willing to take the risk to complete many projects. Despite that, we have done Shahidi Beheshti terminal is ready. It has been started working more. And now I see that there is a greater effort to use this corridor. We have used it for providing supplies to Afghanistan, humanitarian relief, because Pakistan did not agree to send it through its corridors because of the relationship that we have. But so we are using Iran as this, and Iran wants it. Iran and India are strategic partners. But a relationship requires a constant nurturing. And that's the reason that we saw the visit of Dr. Jaishankar to go and take on, especially in the context of Israel-Hamas war and its fallout in the Red Sea, which is going to impact the region even more, the maritime connectivity and everything. So it was getting much worse. So in order to contain that, in order to work out some kind of a strategy with Iran, with which we have a very long history of collaborating, despite the problems, despite the issues, because overall, I would say stability is in everybody's interest. So Chabahar port is now also becoming an integral part of the international north-south transport corridor. So it is a very important port. Secondly, if you don't, Iranians are also smart people. They think that if you are not interested in this, other countries are interested in it.
Yes.
So that is also your strategic choice at the moment. So since you cannot leave it, then another corridor that we talked about was IMEC, on the sidelines of G20, in which was India, Middle East, Europe Economic Corridor. Now that was again connectivity to Europe that provided to us. But if it started, before it could start really take off, this Israel-Hamas war started, which has put Saudi and Israeli rapprochement on a rather packed burner. So if that is happening, then obviously that is a long-term project. So what you have in the hand is you have to look after that. Then that's the reason that immediate focus is now. So what the government of India and Iranians have said is that it should be immune from the turbulence and sanctions and all. And so therefore, it was decided during Dr. Jaishankar's visit that there will be a high-level committee, ministerial committee, which will monitor all the progress of this project and which will report to the leadership.
Thank you so much. You made a very wonderful point. and that yes, if the Gwadar port gives strategic foothold to China in the Strait of Hormuz and the Indian Ocean, so the kind of Indian excitement, yeah, India is very has shown its keen interest to facilitate this Chabahar port. But one question is very important when we talk about the sanction. See, we have seen that in Russian case, Russian economy, the complete it was sanctioned by the West. At the same line of thinking that yes, Iran is also no sanctioned country. But in case of Russia, we always give this a kind of philosophical line in India's foreign policy, like strategic autonomy. We follow, and you can't put pressure on us, which we are going to navigate our foreign policy. What happened in Iranian case? When it started 2003 onwards, and it took a lot of time. So why does not it apply in the Iranian case? We should also say that to the West, we can convince to the West that yes, it is all strategic autonomy. What is the difference?
Well, as far as Chabahar port is concerned, as I told you, this was not a part of the sanctioned item. It has stayed out of the sanctions of the US all through. In addition, for importing Iranian oil, very often we received waivers. India, Korea, and Japan, three countries used to get the waivers from US. But when President Trump came into power, he wanted to pressure Iran even more. And therefore, they said no more, the secondary sanctions will apply to you if you do that. Now, the Indian companies, as you know, are global companies which are dealing in this oil trade or the trade. For them, it's one relationship versus the global relationship. So, it was a cost benefit analysis for them. As far as Russia is concerned, so Russia is basically, and that is, by the way, is the grouse that the Iranians have. They say that if you can buy from Russia, why don't you buy from us?
Yes.
And I believe that this time during the visit, some understanding has been reached in that regard also. Because now we can talk to them in terms of rupee real trade, bilateral trade. India is trying to do that. Of course, the trade will be very much, balance will be in their favor because of the oil prices. But they can use it to invest. They have invested in one of the refineries in India also, the Iranians. So now the another situation that comes into play is the Russian. Now, Russian relationship is a very unique partner. Unique partnership in the historical context, in the modern day context, in your own national interest. You see, the Russian oil was being sold to us at a huge discount. Now, that is something, accessibility. Also, these routes became used also in that process. And then you had the rupee ruble trade experiment from Soviet times. Comfort levels were there. They also agreed to now, but at the same time, it is not only oil. It is a relationship which is also a multifaceted partnership. Whether it is space, whether in nuclear, critical technologies, in your science and technology, in several other areas, which is very critical for you. So therefore, you have to keep that. Strategic autonomy was what? Strategic autonomy is a principled approach that should serve your national interest and in India's case, to serve the global good. So that's what precisely we were trying to do that. Iranians understand that policy very well. They of course want us to buy, but at the same time, I think that it has taken a few years now, and I'm quite sure that my view is that we have to develop some kind of a special purpose vehicles because we do not recognize unilateral sanctions by a country. If the United Nations is imposing sanctions, it's understandable against any country, and that's the reason. So if we say that we don't recognize, then we need to disband it completely from our purview, which we don't do, which cannot do because of the national interest. So therefore, it is important that we have certain companies that deal with a new kind of a thing called special purpose vehicles, and they can deal with the countries with which we want to deal, even if the Western don't like them. So they don't come in the purview. On the other hand, your major companies cannot do the same thing, and that's a problem that we face.
Thank you so much for your deep insights. So as per your points, we can illustrate that yes, we have a strategic autonomy, but that is depend to country to country. And
Not country to country. It depends on situation to situation.
yes, situation to situation, and that means our interest aligned with this specific issue list. We must move ahead as per the issue wise. So thank you so much for this point. Now the next point: how do you see that the kind of proximity with China, Beijing, Tehran proximity? How does it enhance concern about Indian policymakers, especially for the Indian policymakers, and it creates somehow strategic dilemma also, because that Russia and China is very close to Iran, but at the same time, India looks to be very close to Iran. So how do you see this kind of triangle between China, Iran, and India? Because if India is getting late, so China, Iran is showing its own closeness towards the China. So already we have a concern, a legitimate concern that the kind of Chinese proximity with the Russia, and what do you think that if the China is getting more and more close with the Iran, what should we do for that?
No, it is not only Iran. I mean, like us, China is also expanding its strategic footprint in the Middle East, or West Asia as we call it, or anywhere else in our neighborhood also. So that is a challenge that we'll have to live up to. We'll have to counter that challenge all the time. So China is going to be a challenge for India. There is no doubt about it. As far as Russia is concerned, now look at it from the Russia's point of view. Russia is one country that has been a superpower that wants to compete with the United States and others for the strategic influence. Alone, right now, they are not in a position to do so. So, in order to contain the West and the US, they collaborate with China and closely. This is their Prime Minister, President Putin and President Xi Jinping, when they met, they call it partnership without limits. Iran, on the other hand, is again in the same boat. It enjoys the ire of all the Western countries, sanctions. So, birds of same feather flock together. So, this is precisely that is what is happening to serve each other's interests. China is also energy hungry like us. So, China acquires energy from Russia, it acquires energy from Iran, it continues to make its footprint. Plus, let us not forget, China is also a P5 country in the UN Security Council. So anything coming against them in the UN, they can always take care of it. Right? They are in that unique position which Iran also understands. So as far as India is concerned, now you have to see India pivot. The whole world is looking at India. The India and China are two very different systems. Current state, the economies are at an imbalance. They are 5 times larger than us, no doubt about it. India has a very different kind of political system, the largest democracy in the world, the most populous country in the world, going to be the biggest market in the world, which is what is attracting everybody. Your strategic autonomy is also your strength to that extent. That the Russians want you in order to counter China. US wants India to counter China. India wants to extract the maximum mileage for its own national interest, for its own development, so that it becomes a developed country by 2047. That's the target, whatever happens. So I think that our policy at the moment is to get the best out of it without getting entangled. We engage, but we do not entangle ourselves.
Very interesting point that let's engage but not entangle with any group, any camp. Last question that we have seen that in the recent visit to Iran, our External Affairs Minister Dr. Shankar expressed his concern that the kind of attacks on merchant, navy, and ships merchant, and in the Red Sea. So how do you see this kind of and we all know that it is backed by the Tehran, especially the Houthis, Yemen and Houthi. So how do you see that this kind of disruption of Indian trade system?
Well, it is not only Indian, it is the global trading system. The maritime routes, about 12% of the total trade passes through the Red Sea and the Bab el-Mandab and the Strait of Hormuz and then the Suez Canal and all. India depends nearly about 60-70% on it, of this. Most of your energy comes through that. And therefore, it is important that they remain as the global goods, global commons and the safe transit points. So maritime routes are clear. What the Houthis have done is, Houthis have been fighting the Saudis since 2015 or before. There was some kind of a lull, but at the same time they felt ignored, they're being ignored, and therefore they tried to just side with the Hamas and to prove their point that we are supporting Hamas or the Palestinians for that matter. And they started attacking the American ships because America is supporting Israel. Now, in that sense, or any ship that is going to Israel, or trade, anything happening, they are going to target it. They have targeted some of our ships also. Americans launched some kind of an alliance, 10, 15 countries putting their ships there to control. But the sea is vast. So India also launched its own ships. We have been there for a very long time. As a maritime power, India is a resident power in the Indian Ocean. India has deployed now 10 ships which have saved not only our own but have also saved many other countries' ships also. From piracy continues to be there, from Houthi attacks also which are there. So when Dr. Jaishankar went to Iran, one of the key points was to discuss how can we contain this. Not only this, the first fear for the world and more so for India is that there is no conflagration of the conflict in West Asia. Because if that happens, then you are in a very dangerous situation. Because West Asia is a very, very important geography for you. It's your extended neighborhood. You're dependent for your energy on them, energy security totally. You depend on economy, you depend on maritime routes, you depend for your 9 million population there, Indians, who are remitting about $60 billion to you. So it is very important that the place remains stable. And in order to do that, you have to take action, which India has taken. You have deployed your ships and assets, but you are saying that we are doing it ourselves for the global welfare, not in concert with A power or B power. So that is something that shows that India has a strategic autonomy in operation at the moment there.
Thank you so much. Last question. How do you think that this Chabahar port will counter Gwadar port in the Indian Ocean region?
Well, it is strategically located 80 kilometers, that's not very far to each other. If China, which is already working very hard on this, and I understand Saudis also wanted a refinery, what China is trying to do by this port? They want to, their Malacca Straits, for which the majority of the traffic goes, is a vulnerable port. It can be choked. They want an alternative. And that's why they want an alternative in Gwadar, which is direct, all the Middle Eastern oil can pass through it. So they are looking at that point, which will continue. They will arrive there. There is no doubt about it. Even though there is opposition in the Balochistan, there is that area is Pakhtunkhwa and all that. This is unrest in the place. But this is China's perceived strategic interest, which they have made as a major flag point for their BRI project, of which CPEC, China-Pakistan Economic Corridor, very important. From our perspective, we have seen in the case of Afghanistan, we wanted to send aid for them, 50,000 tons. The Pakistanis created a mischief. They won't allow this to go through. So you need alternates. You need to reach out to Central Asia. You need to reach out to Afghanistan, which are your natural neighbors. And therefore, Iran provided that, and they agreed to provide us this exit, some kind of access to these countries, and that's why it's important. So Iran's importance is civilizational for us. It is a strategic country. We need to work with them, and I think they also know that they have to work with us.
Yes, you are right in that sense that yes, Iran is not only, we cannot look Iran as only the trade purpose, the trade objectives. Yes, we know that Iran is a very good partner for energy security. But at the same time, we have very good relation in terms of civilization. As Ambassador Trigunayat pointed out that yes, we have been traditional links, with civilizational links with Iran. And I think you rightly pointed out that yes, Iran is very confident of India's civilizational ties, despite having some inclination to the West, but Iran would not be upset this kind of India's engaged with the West. At the same time, India should not be also upset that Iran's close proximity with the China, because India has a specific position on Iran and vice versa. So thank you so much, Ambassador Trigunayat, for coming, for joining us at the podcast. Thank you.
Pleasure. Thank you.